And so we have our first speaker, Rory Woodbridge, and he's talking about how to craft a new message. So without further ado, Rory, the stage is yours. I'll drop off and I'll join you for Q&A. So good to
Cool.
go.
Nice. Thanks, Pep. So hi, everyone. I'm very pleased to get the chance to speak to you about how to craft a new message. And thanks again to the Winter team for inviting me to do so. I've tried to make this as much of a usable how-to kind of talk as possible. So we'll be talking tactics more than strategy. I hope that works for everyone. But first of all, I should probably introduce myself before I start giving out all the advice. I'm Rory. I've been working in product marketing for the past 10 years and have been lucky enough to work at some great brands across big tech and the world of SaaS scale-ups. I also write a regular newsletter called The Product Marketer, which you may want to sign up for if you're not already a subscriber. I was initially going to talk about positioning for the Winter Games and then realized it would be much more useful to talk about messaging instead. And that's because the thing is, positioning is a bit of a mythical beast. It can sometimes feel like an abstract thing none of us quite fully understand. And yes, I'm very into Stranger Things right now. I hope a few others are as well. And so, yeah, the thing is, there's a few challenges that we face with positioning. Firstly, it's that shifting or affecting your positioning can actually take a very long time, and you can't really shift it with any one single campaign or project. It also gets complicated very quickly. Your positioning likely differs depending on the country you're marketing in, which segment of the market you're addressing, and various other factors. There's also the reality that positioning isn't fully in your control. There's the positioning you want to have, and then there's the positioning you actually have based on external factors and your own product or services limitations. Plus, positioning is one of those areas that isn't owned by any one team or individual. Everyone, especially leadership, has an opinion on it. It's much easier and more realistic to take full control of your message. And that's why I want to talk about messaging. So I agree with many people that have spoken about this topic that messaging is not the same thing as positioning. But I would say that messaging can be an extension of your positioning. And a lot of the process for how you get to it might be the same. But the good things about messaging is that it can be agile. It's not a permanent decision. It isn't, and if it isn't working, you can change it quickly or pull the plug on it altogether. And that's why I like to talk about messaging as if it's a campaign. I see new messaging as having a launch date, being something that your company can rally around, and being something that has an end date to reassure anyone internally that this doesn't have to be permanent. But how do you know when it's a good time for a new message? Well, I think a really good example of this that I've seen at many companies is when you go from what I call an old world scenario versus a new world scenario to being an established competitive market. And so what I mean by this is what I mean by old world versus new world is when you're introducing new technology that is replacing something archaic or non-existent. At some point, though, things in your category will change, hopefully, and there's a need to differentiate. And that requires a new message altogether. You're no longer doing category creation, you're trying to stand out in a market somewhat. But there's other reasons you might need a new message. First of all, you might have a sudden shift in the competitive landscape. An emerging player might suddenly become more dominant, or you might even find yourself having moved from being a challenger to being an incumbent and having to rethink your messaging because of that. Then there's the market itself. Economic changes or industry trends can affect the needs of your target customer and therefore change the value drivers that you want to talk about. Or you might just see or feel that your messaging isn't performing anymore on your key distribution channels and need to adapt. And then finally, it's back to positioning. It could come back to a need to shift your positioning somewhat and using messaging as a tactic for doing so. And so I thought it'd be useful to use an example from my time at Whereby to sort of look at crafting a new message. And so Whereby is a video conferencing company founded in Norway, and they were at the forefront of the remote work movement, having done it long before it was fashionable. And at that time, they were very much a new world solution to an old world problem. Their message was focused on convincing businesses to embrace the world of remote work and flexible working, very much still at that point of product category creation, or at least trying to find mass appeal for this kind of product category. At this point in a product's lifespan, I think of a product and its competitors as being a bit like the Avengers. It may not feel like it, but with your messaging, you're collectively working together in introducing consumers into a new product category. And all of you stand to benefit somewhat from each other's campaigns. It's a case of a rising tide lifting all boats. But then suddenly, everything changed. The COVID pandemic in 2020 meant that companies around the world embraced remote work literally overnight, and therefore video conferencing too. It was now a switcher's market, and there were some clear incumbents, and they were all really big players, like you can see from the logos on the right. And so for Whereby, there was thus an urgent need for differentiation. And this is where the idea for a new messaging campaign came about. And we'll come back to that later. But first, we're talking about how to craft a new message. So for me, the first place you always have to start, it always comes back to, is insights. Insights should drive everything we do. And whether you're a small or large company, it's important to pull together every piece of insight you can to inform your messaging strategy. And so here are just a few of my go-tos. So I'm a big fan of surveys, and I'm an especially big fan of the Superhuman form of, or popularized by Superhuman, the product market fit survey. I think this goes way beyond understanding how people use your product. I think it can really inform your messaging. But you might also want to tailor your survey to a specific messaging campaign to inform it. As an extension of that, you should probably also speak to your customers and your users about what they love about their product, your product, how they talk about your product, to make sure that you're capturing that when you develop your messaging. But if you're tight on time or budget, you could just use existing reviews to pull in insights, be it G2 or Trustpilot, or an even easier win in sometimes Apple and Google Play's app stores. You should also make sure that you're looking at the competition to understand how special you are and what makes you unique and what your strengths are. And then finally, I think it's useful to look at social listening to see what people are really saying about you and the competition. So once you've got these insights, it's time to develop your theories. It's time to draft what your messaging is going to be about. Who are you going to be talking to and targeting with your message? What are the main value drivers that you see your product and company as having? And what kind of message do you want to focus on? And finally, what is the point of this new message campaign in general? What problem are you solving with this new initiative, and how is it going to move the needle? So once you've developed your theories, it's then time to test them. And there's a bunch of ways that you can test your theories, some scrappy, some more refined. So you can take your rough message ideas and test them on performance marketing channels, be it Facebook or Instagram or Google Ads or something more specialist. Or you can use specialist research sites like Winter, which hopefully a lot of you are all very familiar with, or usertesting.com for even more qualitative feedback. If you don't have the time or budgets for that, it could be as simple as getting feedback from co-workers or people that are familiar with the project or product, or your customers themselves, pulling in more users to test your theories or your rough ideas for messaging. And finally, I am a big believer in that sometimes it has to come down to just gut instinct. Like, we can't be entirely driven by data or entirely by what our customers tell us. There has to be a bit of using our own experience and passion and gut feel for the project to take it forward. So once you've done your testing and you're feeling pretty good, it's then time to get creative. And then I'm not going to be too prescriptive here, because I think there's a lot of ways you can do this. I've seen really good message campaigns come from entirely in-house teams, but you can also get amazing results by working with specialist creative agencies. They're either specialists in what they do for the kind of channel you're thinking of, or related to your industry. But use this process and take your time with it to come up with a message or set of messages that you're truly happy with and can kind of vouch for with anyone else in the business. And so once you have this message or set of messages, it's then time to line up your launch date. And the thing is, it doesn't have to be on any one specific channel. It's choosing the ones that are right for you, the things that need the most work, or the channels that best suit the message campaign that you've come up with. If you want to be sure of the effectiveness of your message before you fully roll it out, then you can still run tests for it. It's not too late, or if you have the time, you can either show it to a small cohort first and get some initial findings, or if you're a sort of a multi-country product, you can stagger the rollout per country and get some initial feedback before it's official and you launch it with a bang. I think what's important to me, though, is that you also bring your message campaign to life with a content plan, using whatever sort of editorial or creative ideas you can. So it's not just fully reliant on the message itself. And so to help do this, I suggest creating a simple message framework that you can share with your content team or the wider business to help get everyone thinking. So it's not just fully on you to come up with the entire campaign. And just an example of this, which will hopefully be useful to some people here. This is just a simplified version of a message framework that I've used a number of times to help me develop kind of, okay, what is the point of this campaign? What are the key messages? And then how do we break that out by persona and the kind of product to really make it useful for teams? Okay, so back to that whereby case study I mentioned, and how we kind of used the previous few slides and process in the whereby scenario. Well, of course, we started with insights, and two key insights I want to kind of hone in on. One about whereby and one about the competition. So for whereby, what we confirmed about our own product was that people loved us for the product's simplicity and its ease of use, and how beautiful the product itself was. People were genuinely feeling more energized after a whereby call than when they used other products. And we also realized we had a special affinity with creatives and marketing agencies, and that they felt that they could impress clients when they hosted calls on whereby. And we realized that therefore we really wanted to create a messaging campaign that would resonate with that audience and get their attention to make sure we were doing something creative, something interesting and bold. And then the other key insight was that people were actually exhausted by video conferencing at the point of this. It had been many months into the pandemic, and that video calls had become synonymous with the big incumbent competitors. So people were talking about Zoom and Google Meet instead of talking about video conferencing specifically. And so there we actually saw an opportunity. So we decided to play to our strengths and our competitors' weaknesses and focus on the negatives of the existing video conferencing landscape and introduce whereby as a fresh solution to these challenges. So this is us taking those insights and then developing some theories based on them. And then so we took that theory around what if whereby was the kind of solution to this negative kind of exhausting video fatigue, or people talk about Zoom fatigue, video fatigue situation, and introduced the idea of better meetings. And so we did a bunch of tests on different kind of messaging. We used Facebook and Instagram ads to do this. And what was clear, this idea of like better meetings, or what if meetings could be better, resonated really well. So we felt good about that theory. So we then began the creative process, and were fortunate enough to work with a really amazing agency called Lucky Generals, a creative agency based in London, who were able to take our core concepts and turn them into something special. And what we landed on was that the key sort of the hero item of our message campaign would actually be a 30-second video. And the theme would still be on better meetings, but they were able to sort of take our insights and come up with a really nice, punchy tagline, which is whereby where better meetings happen. And so we love this, and we were able to sort of think about it internally and then turn it into that wider content campaign that I was just talking about. So we, of course, did the sort of conventional things like reskinning our socials, but we also got a bit more creative. We conceived our own virtual out-of-home campaign with the same tagline and same concept, but then we also brought in like a really great review that we'd had in the New York Times in Wirecutter, and then used that as a way of quantifying our tagline. And we actually just, this kind of like really went like sort of semi-viral on some of the social sites, and people thinking it was a real out-of-home campaign, but it was very effective at getting our message across. We also wrote magazine ads like this. And we also used the campaign as an excuse to write our own manifesto for how to run better, more productive meetings, which we based a bunch of content around. So that's my sort of example case study of how like I've used those tips to then turn that into something actionable. And so finally, I just thought I'd share like a few like final thoughts about how I think about messaging. First of all, my number one tip is, and I get this from sort of like just a general tip for writing, not just messaging, is show, don't tell. Find creative ways to get your message across rather than being really literal with your point. Stuff like the easiest used product to use, like the easiest to use product in this industry or whatever, is just very uninspiring. It's sort of very like well trodden in the world of both SaaS and consumer marketing. So finding creative ways to show it without saying it, I think, is really something to achieve. Next, somewhat as an extension, is try and talk about outcomes, not features. And I know this is something Pepper's written about quite a lot over the past, but focus on the benefits that people will get from using your product or service or company, rather than just getting into the weeds of like how your product works and all the features that it contains. That isn't what gets consumers excited, and isn't kind of the way that like messaging trends are going. Third, and this is something that's been beaten into me over the years, but it's make sure that you're showing the right message for the right user at the right time in the right place. Not every message will work in every channel, and that's totally fine. It doesn't have to. Just make sure you're thinking about what is the best kind of combination of these things for what you're trying to achieve. Fourth, always be ready to quickly adapt your message post-launch based on the feedback and results you're getting early doors. So I just call this launch and iterate. And then finally, stay open-minded. Your new message might not work at all for whatever reason. It might just fall flat. And that you need to be open-minded to that, and that be an okay thing. You may just have to simply revert, and that is all part of the process. And that's it. Those are my tips for how to craft a new message. I think just slightly within the 20-minute time limit, but hopefully that gives us time for some questions and conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Rory. Guys, if you have a question, use the questions tab to post a question, and I might ask it. Rory, let's start off with, when do I create a new message? You know, and you joined a new company. You're at Pleo now. Like, how are you thinking about messaging there? Like, when is it time to change existing messaging?
Yeah, I mean, I head up product marketing, and so product marketing is often sort of either on the hook for this stuff or a big influencer. And for me, product marketing, where it is now in 2022, it's no longer like the mouthpiece of the product. Product marketing sits at the heart of the business in a strategic sense. And so for me, the questions I want to know are, what are the biggest challenges that the business faces, not just the product anymore? What challenges does the business face in a commercial sense as well as a product sense? And then, does our current message help solve those problems? And if that's not the case, then yeah, I go about trying to make that so. And so I've been at Pleo about 6-7 months now, and so kind of, yeah, I mean, this topic's timely. It's something I'm thinking about a lot because I've been here long enough to have some thoughts on the topic. And again, it's about the right channel. It's that tip around the right message for the right people in the right place. I think we have a very strong message, an established message in some parts of the market. But whenever you're looking to like grow your customer base and you're looking at new horizons, I think that's when a need for new messaging comes in as well.
You also mentioned that, you should redo your messaging if it falls flat. How do you know? How do you know that?
Well, I guess there's a few ways. Yeah, there's a few ways you can react to it, and it comes down to the point. So if the messaging was conceived like, okay, we really need to optimize our like acquisition marketing, be it like direct response or performance marketing on Facebook or Instagram, and it isn't moving the needle, then that's obviously something that's quite kind of notable, like from a metrics point of view. I think the other thing that's like more harder to quantify is when a message doesn't resonate with your core customer base, and actually maybe you've done something that isn't on brand or doesn't feel right for your company, and actually that starts to trickle through in weeks or months when you're chatting with friends or people at networking events, and you realize, oh, do you know what? Actually, we didn't need to go all in that direction because it's doing more harm than good. But again, it's I think just staying open-minded and realizing that a lot of this stuff, it's the subjective stuff. Like but I think like advice I've always had and been given is like always be bold. Like as in don't like, I think try not to compromise, and like and do you sort of feel strongly about the messaging you're going with and feel like that you personally can stand by it and vouch for it and defend it from an emotive sense, not just a performance marketing sense.
Awesome, thank you. A bunch of questions from the audience coming in, so let's just start going through them one by one. John is asking, what was the impact of your messaging case study?
Yes. So I think it did a bunch of things, and like as in I think it got us a lot of attention, and I think it helped us understand our overall kind of narrative as a company. Like, and again, this was more of a kind of, there wasn't like any kind of like metric that we were trying to work towards, although the campaign itself drastically had a significant impact on both like organic search traffic and direct traffic, which was obviously a great result and something we were hoping for. But what it did, it kind of gave us a narrative for the following kind of 6 months or like long period of time to be like, okay, what are that's like the narrative, and then what are the content pillars, what are the marketing moments that we're going to create based on that. And then obviously it's also kind of a mantra for your product to live up to as well. Like, are we still standing for that message of better meeting? So I think there were a bunch of benefits beyond the kind of, okay, what's it doing to my marketing numbers?
Cool. Next one, Edsel is asking, what metrics do you look at to determine if your message is working?
So I guess we talked about it a little bit, but like I'd say kind of how I view like success is if like it's over a longer period of time, but are the concerns that you were getting from customers who were saying no to you, be it kind of I use Winter a lot, like I've used it a lot over the past couple of years, and like do those concerns that like come up on in feedback like that start to be negated and are replaced by different but kind of like lower priority concerns? Or in win-loss analysis, is the brand perception issues that are coming up, are they changing? Are they going away? Are you making a dent on it that way? And then other than that, it is things like kind of your click-through rate, your conversion rates. Like, is it kind of like are our campaigns performing more effectively, and is it contributing somewhat to like the cost of acquisition going down?
Yeah, absolutely. I want to add on here, and I think on the website, I mean, the media is kind of different, but on the website, I think conversion rate, the sign-up rate, is what you want to measure quantitatively. And so we work with AppQs, and we redid their messaging based on winter data, and their visit to trial sign-up, trial start conversion rate increased like 70%, only changing the messaging. Well, some imagery too, but image is also part of messaging. But qualitatively, I like to think of messaging like we need to distill it down to components like clarity, and that you can give a numeric score to how clear is the message to the intended recipient, how relevant it is, what is the perceived value, like how badly do you want. So if you unpack it that way, basically that's how you measure messaging.
Yeah, because your website's it's like your shop front, and it's like, if you thought about a physical shop front, it's like, sure, you could put in kind of like £1 t-shirts outside, and that would bring in a lot of footfall, but maybe not, but that obviously doesn't work if you're trying to introduce a premium brand that where you want a certain kind of customer base. And it's the same with your homepage message has to be informed by the data, but also that gut feel that I mentioned, and making sure that it is true to kind of what you're trying to achieve as a business and a brand.
Nat is asking, how do you create surveys at the stage of collecting insights? Meaning, you should already have some hypothesis about a new messaging, right?
So I think so. If you say you establish the need for a new message or new message campaign, yes, there's a good chance that you've already, as a company, conducted a survey recently, somewhat that could inform it if you're looking to move fast. But there's also a chance that you haven't. And I think that would be the point that you go, okay, let's take a little bit of time here. Let's use our existing customer base to just pull in what it is that our customers love about our product, our brand, our tone of voice. I really like to sort of ask them questions around kind of what kind of person would get value from this product, or how would you describe this product in your own words? Because that's sometimes where like the gold dust can come from, is understanding it in your own customers' languages, and that won't always be available to hand, especially if you're an early phase company, or you're looking for to make quite a seismic pivot, and you want to only survey the kind of the chunk of customers that look like the future customers that you're trying to acquire.
Abhilasha is asking, you say product marketing sits at the heart of the business now and addresses business challenges, but how does this overlap with product management, and how do you define ownership and clarify the separation of functions throughout the organization?
So it's a fun one, but yeah, product marketing. I mean, we're there to be the product person in the room in commercial, when dealing with commercial teams, and then be the commercial minded person in the room when you're talking with product managers. It's not our job to be product managers. We don't manage the work of engineers, but I always see it. We are bringing insights to product. We are trying to we remind them of the message, the vision, but we're also making sure that product strategy is aligned with the strategies of the commercial teams. So I just sort of see us dotted between marketing, sales, product, CX, you name it, and being the bridge or glue between those different groups.
That's a really well put. Last question here. Jacob is asking, how do you find the balance between incorporating creativity while articulating the product's practicality or functionality?
I think it's I think it's just about like what lives kind of above the fold, or like what you grab someone's attention with. You want to get people's attention with something interesting, bold, emotional, something that goes for the heart. If that interests them, then it's, I think, time to go into the detail, and that's like you have space for that in whatever channel you're working with, really. But yeah, it comes back to that. Outcomes, like what is someone going to get from engaging with your product or becoming a customer? Get them with that, and then you can go into the detail of what features it has, or how many gigabytes, or whatever it is you sell. That's my view, at least.
We have time for one last one. Jeffrey is asking, how often should you change or refresh messaging?
I think definitely comes back to the needs of the business. I think it can be fine to not change it for quite some time, and by that I mean, like, as in, you can go a whole year without kind of touching your core message if you think it's working and you're and things are going well. But tie it back to the needs of the business, and then also if you have the time and resource, then start getting more interesting and going, okay, well, what if we stick with that core message, but we break off this segment that's maybe underperforming and start thinking about a new message just for that group and hit them in that space. If you've got the time and passion and energy for more new messaging conversations, then I guess there's always opportunity.
Awesome. Rory, thank you so much.
No worries. It's a pleasure. Thanks.